Welcome to Committed to Diversity. Look at our performers with disabilities. We have the great pleasure to give you a sample of some of the wonderful work of some of this evening's panelists. So please roll film.
Hey, ow! It's too hard. I'm not a fighter. I'm a lover, Dad. Entertaining people. Like, well, I used to do Sammy Davis Jr. impressions.
Hey, baby, you are the sunshine of my life. I was born hard of hearing, and that was the cool. They thought I was stupid talking.
Right! Golden Glove! No, Dad, you know, I hear people tell me that if you keep on smoking cigarettes like that every day, pretty soon you get some black lung. You gotta be careful. Oh, is that right? Well, let me explain something to you. You see me, I'm a black man, is that right? Well, if I get some black lung, what's the difference?
Let me explain. Whoa, who is this? Oh, this is my dad. He said that I shouldn't be drafted in the army because I am deaf. Whoa, wait a minute. You can speak. Yeah, but I can't hear. Whoa, hold it right there. You don't fool me, boy. Next week, you go up to boot camp.
Here we are together, and everything between us is good. Would you catch me if I fall for you? 'Cause I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling. Will you promise to be there? Stay by my side always, whenever I need you. Don't let me down, no, no. If I give you my all, don't let me fall. Would you do that for me? Hold me. Will you love? Will you love me?
Nick, did you put the brake on? We talked about this. I bet I still beat you to the car. What? Seriously? This cannot be happening. Woo! I'm gonna be so late. Oh, no, I'm not. What a ride.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done, sweetheart. Snälla, vad fan tror du går? Om den är där framme, jag vet att du har den. Vill du skydda mig med ångavända? skider dig. Lille lort, din lille bagmand. Hvem fanden tror du, at du sidder derinde? Skider dig, åbn døren, din lille lort, mand! Er du død, eller hvad jeg henter derinde? Åh, døren for helvede, mand! Hvor? Skal du over med mig, ja? Hvor?
Okay, Cal.
Du ligner udskidt æblegrød.
English, please.
Go to hell.
Nice. Very nice. First you attacked me, then you told me here, please.
Whatever happened to you?
What happened to you?
You know what happened to me.
Interesting third date, though. And so you haven't seen or heard from him in 25, 30 years?
No. No, he kicked me out when I came out. There's been a slight change of plan. I asked my dad to come home with me.
You did what?
Look, I'm just trying to do the right thing here. I'm trying to be a good son.
What? This is about your guilt? I was almost the worst kind of homophobic parent. I almost lost you forever.
Make a wish, sweetie.
I wish I can fly. I'm so strong.
Yes, you are, Gia. But even the strongest people cannot fly. You need wings.
But dragons have wings. Right, dragon? 3, 2, 1, fly!
High above the world, far beyond the everyday.
Yes.
I'm not sure about this. He's a good guy. Despite the fact that he is 486 syndrome.
Yeah, but I know. He's not normal.
Love him?
Yeah, I do. Just the way he is.
Make a toast to the new normal. It's better like this by far. Bring it in, hug it out. It's the new normal. We're all of the way we are. 'Cause we're all of the way we are.
So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to clear up a little bit of a misnomer. I think that when people in the industry talk about hiring somebody with a disability or have a role for someone with a disability, they think of their disability first. Okay, I need a guy with no hands. Go find me somebody. I need somebody in a wheelchair. And their disability is always first. what I want to focus on real quickly is that there's talent and experience behind those disabilities. And I think that's what gets lost right off the bat in this industry is the lack of understanding that there are numerous actors out there and writers and producers and directors that aren't just disabled and have that uniqueness, but they're incredibly experienced and have great training. So I want to start with the actors. CJ, you just got discovered last year in Baby Driver. Strangely, you've been working for 35 years before that. So give us a little background on your experience and your training.
Okay. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Good. Well, so talking about my background as in my work for the past 2 years, 2 hours of work. Whatever. I was born in St. Louis. Oh, excuse me. Ooh, okay, yay. Good. Afterwards, we'll go out for drinks, okay? Yay. So I signed very fast, so I'm sorry for the interpreter because he's going to try to catch up with me. So I'm going to give him a break. So I grew up in St. Louis. I grew up oral, so all the time I loved acting. I loved seeing making people laugh at home, at the deaf school. And
also, like going to the bathroom and stuff. Okay, go ahead. It's okay. Yeah. So you said you like to. Okay. So now, growing up, my goal was to be an actor and entertainment. So I moved here in LA, and so I was knocking on doors, and they were just shutting it in my face. So I'd open up another door, they'd shut it in my face, and it was just, again and again, it would happen a lot. So I decided to do a one-man show on tour for 40 years long, so I just toured all over the world doing that, and I continued doing that. And so, that was my skill, my acting. So then I came back to LA, and I tried to see and figure out if I can get through, with some theater work. And then something popped up with the show, Frasier. And so that was great. That was like, oh, yay, awesome, okay. That was a great taste for me. I loved it. And so it was like an orgasmic taste. It was amazing. Yeah. I wanted more. But it didn't happen. So another 15 years went by. And then Baby Driver, they asked about that. And so, the story continues. So that's kind of how it started.
Thank you. John.
Me. What was the question?
Tell us a little bit about your experience and any training, your training. Why are you equipped as any other actor, irregardless of your disability?
Well, I started out in high school and then through college and trained and was also musically inclined. And as it said in the bio, I started playing piano when I was 3 years old. I started taking lessons when I was 4. And I studied piano continuously for 17 years, all the way through college, and was a concert pianist. And then in between acting and singing jobs, I sang opera professionally for about 10 years. And in between acting and singing jobs, I worked a real job, as my dad used to say. And I worked for this company that painted above-ground water tanks, high, above-the-ground water tanks. And I was working in this industrial site in North Carolina, and a electric line. I had a little aluminum extension pole doing some touch-up paint. An electric line arced across, and it burned my arms, and I spent the next 4.5 months in the burn center in Chapel Hill. It was 7,600 volts. So it kind of went in under my arm, across my chest, and where I was leaning, it went out my left cheek. So if somebody calls me a half-ass, they don't know how true it is, because it blew a hole in me from here to here. So soon after that, I'd always been acting and, wanted to do some more, and did theater and musical theater. And I saw a episode of China Beach with Dana Delaney that had Harold Russell on it. And I didn't know Harold Russell, didn't know anything about him. And in the episode, he played a grandfather that was coming back for Thanksgiving. And he was holding a styrofoam cup by the top of the lip, like I did with hooks. I'm going, that guy's really got hooks, because everybody else I'd seen on TV with hooks, you could see that the prosthetic was really big and fat, and their really hand was in it, and one was hanging way down here, and the other one was up here. So I never saw anybody, as everybody says, I never saw anybody like me on TV. But this guy was real. So I went home and looked him up and to figure out who he was. And the funny story I don't like to tell is back then you could dial 555-121, tune in the area code of whatever. And right after the show, they did a story on Entertainment Tonight about him. And so it said he lived in Hyannisport, Mass. So I went home and looked up the area code and asked for the telephone number for Harold Russell, because I thought, this guy's really an actor, you know, with no hands. I can do this. And so I called information, and they gave me the number, and I dialed it. And I said, he answered the phone. And I said, Mr. Russell? He goes, yes. I go, Mr. Harold Russell? He goes, yes. I go, the movie star? Just like that. And he kind of laughed, and I told him I was a double amputee recently and had been acting before and wanted to do it again. And over the years, we became very good friends and got to talk a lot. And he told me a story that after he did The Best Years of Our Life, Harold Russell was the first ever person with a disability to win an Oscar. And so he, in 1947, he won for Best Supporting Oscar for The Best Years of Our Lives. And he told me that when he left the studio that day in 1947, that the director called him over to the side and said, you know, son, this is a fluke that a guy with no hands is acting in this movie. You should go out and get an education and a real job. And unfortunately, 70 years later, it's almost still the truth. So, or 40 years later, it's almost still the truth. So that was sort of my inspiration that sort of got me back out and got started again. And since then, I list myself as a sometimes working actor, which sounds better than most of the time unemployed.
And Donna, you know, I think it speaks to you that education-wise, I mean, you have a degree in dance. I think that there's this also misconception that people with disabilities, if they do go to college, it's certainly not probably for the arts, because what are the chances? So can you speak to your experience and your background a little bit?
Okay. I started dancing when I was 10, and I had a lot of jazz and tap, and then later I had some acting, and then later I began with modern and acting classes. But I was little. I have Turner syndrome, which is a chromosomal, one of the X chromosomes is either missing or incomplete. And it sometimes causes short stature. So I had that going first. It's unrelated to FSH muscular dystrophy, so it had nothing to do with that. So I just continued my dancing, and I had my legs working, and everything was fine. I tried to get into ballet companies, but they were saying I was too short, so I'd come home very discouraged and upset. And but I still wanted to do dance, and so I went through high school dancing, I went through college dancing. They didn't quite know what to do with me because of my size, so I became like the baby monster in the ballet Firebird. And I became the last one in character dancing that came out late, you know, as like a humorous, you know, thing, because they were, I wasn't really the average height, and so they had to make things up for me. And then the muscular dystrophy came on later in adulthood. And so after I toured with Alvin and the Chipmunks and did these music videos and several TV and film, playing characters, and dolls, monsters, aliens, dolls on music boxes, anything you could think of, character-wise. Then I got slowly began to lose my muscle range, and it became slowly one arm and then another arm. And I remember thinking when I was in college, you know, being really happy taking 3 and 4 classes a day, doing rehearsal after that, then studying as well. And I said to myself, what would I do if I couldn't dance anymore? And I thought, I think I probably want to die, you know? But then this happened to me, and then I thought, no, you can't die. And I still had a passion inside of me, and I still continued. And I met this wonderful lady over here who had also, when she saw me and saw somehow some kind of a story out of me. And then we came to work together and be creative. And I love being creative, and I love having the passion, and I love working with Peggy. And I also work with a dance choreographer as well, who has made such beautiful dances and works with me with these beautiful people that I don't know if this hadn't happened to me, that I would have the chance to work with them, because I also auditioned for Debbie Allen for the Academy Awards, and I was like, okay, I'm not like any of the other people that are going to be on the Academy Awards. But somehow I worked with Tam Warner, who's a choreographer, and she worked with me. I got to work with Scott Hislop, who is on the Oscars and the Academy Awards, and these wonderful people that Peggy introduced me to. And I'm just forever grateful and blessed. And let me soak this all in, because everyone in this room, I just can't believe I'm here, sitting up here. And I never thought, as a little girl at the age of 10, practicing dance poses on a chair in my living room, that I would ever be here at a SAG panel talking about my muscles going weak, which I thought I was going to have to kill myself in college if this ever happened to me.
Thank you. Well, and as Ellen referred to earlier, we're here because of the inception of the idea with you, so thank you for that. You know, we're hearing about being inspired by the one story, like John saying about the one story that he saw somebody like him. And then CJ and Donna, you know, that there are very few. There wasn't somebody that looked like me on camera. But, you know, that's all very true, and it's also true that there have been remarkable stories about people with disabilities on film television. Were there, like, and the content creators and Gail, you know, I want to demystify the idea that there aren't, that it can't work. And so what are some of those stories that you found in the history of film television that did work and that inspired you and that were a change? Just, I mean, we don't need to go into long details about them, but just so people know, like, oh yeah, there was that one, and there was that one, and that one. Anything come to mind?
Well, I started out in this business just as the mom of a little boy with Down syndrome who was born in 1979. And back then I could walk into a restaurant with him on my hip and I could silence the restaurant, just complete silence. It was a different time. I was up at Universal Studios and I had a backpack on my back and Blair was in it and he was 2 years old. And a woman said, I have one of those at home. And I said, a backpack? And she said, no, a child like that. But I live in South Africa and we don't take them out in public. So let me take you back to 1979. It was a very, very different time. We did not get assurance that children with disabilities could have an inclusive education until 1975. So my age group didn't necessarily go to school with people with disabilities in their classrooms. When the show Life Goes On came on the air in 1989, it starred Chris Burke, who had Down syndrome, and Blair was 10 years old. And I said, oh, Blair, you're going to love this show. You're going to grow up and be like Corky. He has Down syndrome. And Blair said to me, no, I'm not going to have Down syndrome. My dad's went away. My brothers went away. And I didn't realize in his head, he decided that people outgrew Down syndrome because I wasn't giving him any adult images and role models with Down syndrome. I wasn't in Down syndrome groups at that time where he was meeting adults, so he felt it was something that would go away. Well, a couple of episodes in, he was okay. He thought this was pretty cool, and he saw a future for himself, I think. And my son Tim, who was 14, was glued to the TV too, and I think it's probably because Kelly Martin, who was 14, was on the show. But he also saw, he was validated as a brother, that he could love his brother and he would be allowed to disdain his brother at times, because that's what brothers do. And yet when you have a sibling with a disability, you're not so sure that those rules still apply for you. Oddly enough, about 2 seasons in, we noticed when we go to a restaurant, instead of someone saying to us, what would he like to eat? People were actually turning to Blair and saying, what would you like to eat? And I don't think people were mean or cruel before that show. I think that they just didn't know they had permission to speak to that face if they'd never met someone with Down syndrome. And if you recall, back then, we had, any of you that lived back then, in the old days. For those of you that didn't, let me explain. There were 5 channels. Imagine that, how poor and neglected we were. 5 channels. So if you didn't watch Life Goes On, you at least saw commercials for it. So you knew it was around, and you knew that Chris Burke was a living, breathing, talking man who happened to have an extra chromosome. And oddly enough, many, many, many years later, Blair was 15 instead of 10. The show Life Goes On was airing on Lifetime in the afternoons. And at that time, my 6 nieces had come to live with us, and they'd never been around their cousin except for maybe once on a holiday here or there. And every afternoon at 2, those 6 girls sat down in front of the TV and piled up like puppies to watch Life Goes On. And I think it's the way they educated themselves about now living in the home with a cousin with Down syndrome. That is my motivation. That is why I do everything that I do, for the social justice of it, to change images, to change people's opinions. I've been on a set with my son the last few days. I don't hate anything more than being on a movie set. It is not what I love. It is not who I am. You guys make me crazy that you're passionate about this, because I cannot figure it out. But I know that you're going to make a difference, and some mother's going to see someone with Down syndrome on TV, and she's going to be having to make the hard choice as to what to do about a pregnancy, and she's going to get hope, and hope is what she needs. Somebody else is going to maybe hire someone in a wheelchair for a job because they've seen somebody employed on TV. And thank God you crazy actors go out and do this over and over again, because I wouldn't have the power to do what I almost feel like an evil, I've got this evil scheme that I'm out there taking advantage of people. Aha, I'll put one there and I'll show you. But it's about the difference, and it's about making people learn without pushing it in their face, for them to just calmly and mildly learn. I get asked, I'm sorry, I'm going way too long. You cannot ask me any more questions after this. I get asked, whenever I say, can the attorney be in the wheelchair, I often get back, well, people will wonder why he's in the wheelchair. And I'll say, well, he's in the wheelchair because he can't walk, and he's in the courtroom because he went to law school. I mean, I don't understand why we need to know why the attorney's in the wheelchair. You and I don't ask every day when we see someone in the market in a wheelchair why they're there. We've got to get people past this so that we can see people and include people and have them in our lives. And I think we're seeing a little more for a lot of reasons. Many of you out there like me have been doing this for 30 years. But also, we're getting the inclusion generation who went to school with people in their classrooms into executive positions now. The old school didn't know what it was like to have an inclusive classroom. Now we have executives and creators who experience that and see the joy and the understanding of having someone like that in their lives. Okay, I'm done.
And so, Rosser and Peggy, you guys have created some really compelling content that involves people with disabilities. What was the genesis for that? What is the reason that, you have a blank screen? Why include someone with a disability?
So for Invisible, I made it in 2016 as part of the Easter Sales 48-hour disability film challenge, and I heard about it through the Producers Guild, and I'm a member of the Producers Guild. And I've been a filmmaker for a really long time, and I was like, oh, those 48-hour things, never, nope, not gonna do it. And then this one popped up, and I was like, absolutely, because of representation, whether it's women or LGBTQ, older folks that aren't on screen enough, and then disability. I'm like, oh my God, how could I not do this? So I jumped in feet first, but I had a little bit of an ace up my sleeve where I thought of immediately my friend Brian, who has cerebral palsy and played the male role, and I'd met him on set like 10 years prior, and I just called him and I said, do you want to do this? Because you're the first person I thought of, and if he didn't, I was still going to do it. But he's like, oh, it's in a week. I don't know. I mean, maybe next year. And I was like, have you seen me work? Like, we'll be ready. I said, if we're ready, will you do it? And he's like, yeah, okay. And we were so ready, and it was the best. And I was just super glad.
And Donna talked a little bit about it, but how did Donna on the Go come about, and what compelled you to create a story, not only create a story, but create one that's so unique?
First of all, I believe it's the responsibility of the majority to include the minority, no matter what. It's like we need to speak for you to represent you because it's not being done. So we have to do it ourselves. And for Donna, right? For Donna, we're friends. And we were in Target one day, just screwing around, and they have the little scooter carts. And she had the heart, she's little, as you know. It didn't even recognize her weight on it. It was going back and forth, and we were laughing, and I just filmed on my iPhone this, I just put it together. We were crying laughing. And I went home and I put it together just to cheer her up, just to make like a little video, and I looked at it. I did this one little shot with the iPhone where I like went around the corner and she zoomed up, and I thought, wow, that looks like, it almost looks like a dolly track that would take a long time. It didn't look bad on an iPhone, right? Because they're 4K now, just like, broadcast TV. And I put it together and I thought, we might have something here. And then she dances, and this wonderful choreographer named Tam Warner, who does work with disabled dancers and able-bodied dancers, and it's touching, and men see this and weep. I mean, it's really, I've had grips on the show that I worked on, came in, that was good. You're like, wow, I think we have something, So we did the show. I was very lucky to find her. She always goes on about this, but it's equal. Very, very lucky, and it worked out. Thanks.
So I'm curious, as an actor, every time I do get cast, the character I portray suddenly becomes a little person, whether they were written for it or not. And suddenly that informs, just because of who I am, it informs so much of that character, and therefore makes him unique from all the other lawyers or all the other doctors or all the other pimps that have been played before. Did you like that one? Good. So, how does your disability inform your roles? And if so, how? And then building on that, like, do you get the opportunity to audition for roles that aren't specific to your disability? John, CJ, Donna, anyone?
I would say within the last year, maybe 24 months or so, I've always had one or two auditions that were not disability related, but more recently now I'm getting a lot more, or getting to be seen a lot more. It's not who I am, but what I can play. And in real life, I'm a dad. I'm a granddad now. And I'm the first ever double-hand amputee to be trained and certified as a private pilot in the United States. And I'm also the first ever double-hand amputee to be a PADI scuba diving instructor. That's my real life. but I would never be asked to audition for any of those things in the fantasy world of Hollywood, as a pilot or as a scuba diver or any of those roles. So, but yet I could play them all in my real life, but not in TV or film. So I think there has been some movement of the needle. I think things are better. I mean, we were talking earlier, last month, I had 6 auditions in 1 week, and only one of those was for an actor with a disability. So, I mean, usually I don't have 6 auditions in 2 years, but so it was kind of interesting that that particular week, 5 of those auditions had nothing to do with my disability. Now, I didn't book the role. I booked the room, but I didn't book the role. But still, I'm getting in there, and on 2 of those auditions, the casting director goes, I don't know if it's okay, but may I ask you about your disability? And I went, yes, thanks for opening the door. So, I mean, I sit on a lot of these panels, so I sat and talked to the casting director for 20, 25 minutes before we even auditioned about disability in the media, and representation and things like that. So I think it's getting better. Before, all I thought I'd be able to do was a remake of The Best Years of Our Lives, but now I'm seeing that, but there's not enough. I mean, a colleague recently wrote that, Rachel Handler, a friend of mine, wrote that she got to audition for a role on NCIS New Orleans because the writer put in the description that he walked with a crutch, or the character walked with a crutch. And that was the only reason she got called in the audition. And she booked the role. So she said, I wish writers would write more crutches. But to follow the analogy, I wish we didn't have to depend on a crutch. I should be the dad, I should be the granddad, I should be the scuba diver. And the pilot.
All at the same time.
All at the same time, yeah. Well, I just heard they're making a Snarknado time traveler, so if they can make that, why can't they make a pilot with no hands?
Well, I'm trying to figure, like, really think about it with the role that I got that required me to be disabled. But like right now, I was involved with Cornerstone Theater, and the guy's name was Bill Ratch. He was the director, and he was the best director. He was a really great director on Broadway a few years ago. He was really great. And he contacted me, and he saw me perform my one-man show, and he said, wow, you should join my company. So come on over. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Is it a deaf role? He said, no, it's not related with deaf at all. It's just theater, it's just being a part of the company and I was like, okay. So I got involved, and I signed on stage. And that was, first we did 12th Night. And that was really crazy Shakespeare, we really did that. It was so complicated. I was like, oh my God, going through the script, and I knew nothing. I just was like, oh. And then I just went ahead. It was a challenge, and I put my all into it on stage, and I was signing. And then it all worked out. It went well. And the audience, they were so accepting, and they really enjoyed it. And they came up after and asked questions, are you really deaf? And I would say, yeah, I'm really deaf. Yeah, that's me. And then it just continued, 2, 3, 4 more years. I just continued with different performances. And then I just learned a lot with that group. And in LA, doing plays there. And then I would travel to Watts. We do black theater. I got involved with that and that circle. And people would just look over at me. And they were like, first, like, it was kind of awkward. And then after a while, we'd just sit, we'd talk with me, and we'd like chat it up. And then it was like Mexican. And they're like, okay, I know nothing about that. I don't know Spanish like that. So, that wasn't really what it was. But then all of a sudden it worked out. I was able to, they accepted me for who I am, and I traveled all over the place. And that's where I became more confident in accepting who I was, because it wasn't about me being black or deaf. It was about my talent. And so that really, helped me since then.
So, Gail, I'll give you one more question. Are you seeing, you know, we're talking about maybe there's a little movement here. You're on the front lines. Are you seeing a change? And what is it like to try to beat down those doors and say, hey, why can't you see such and such for this role that is non-descriptive?
You know, it's interesting. I've been realizing that it's hard to do as much advocating as we've been doing because there is so much more coming in specifically for people with disabilities. Last month in July, our little department booked 59 jobs. It was amazing. I know for a fact that actors with disabilities made over $1 million last year. Now, we just need to make it bigger. But they are. There's several casting directors who've said, just send me. I want diversity. I want your people to come. You know, I want them to be submitted to me. I mean, I'm actually starting some submissions with PWD, capital PWD, because the first few things that I pitch on a person that goes with their submission shows up under their picture. And so if I have a casting director that says, I want to include people with disabilities, I start with that, the PWD, then I talk about their acting ability, and then at the end I will probably mention what their disability is. But that way we're getting more people to pay attention and want to see them. Yeah, it's very, you know, I've been in this 30 years. I would say we've had as much movement forward in the last 5 as we had in the last 25. But if any of you have been at some of the events that Scott Silveri has spoken at, who's the creator, producer of Speechless, when he first came to town, he would talk about how accepting everyone was, and he came in with this great story, and everybody loved it, and he said, and I felt so powerful, and I felt so great that people heard me, and he goes, and then I met all of you guys, and I realized for 25 years, you've been running around trying to make this happen, and I came in at the right time after your hard work and was able to make this happen. So all of our hard work is not in vain. I think it is happening and changing.
So like Rosser and John, you've created content, certainly your show. For people out there that are thinking of, you know, maybe I can open my mind and start creating this content, how do you take away that fear of not writing something you know necessarily? If somebody's eager to jump into the waters of this community, you know, with our PC world, which I'm completely comfortable with, there's a lot of areas where you could drown in going into waters you don't know. So do you have, you know, can you speak to, you met Donna, you know, is it just by knowing somebody? Can you do it without knowing someone? Because I would hate that everybody would have to just know a friend with a disability to be able to write something. Anybody can speak to that?
I don't think any role has to be disability specific. There are a lot of dads out there. I just happen to be a dad with no hands. I changed diapers. My wife passed early, so I raised a little girl from the time she was, you know, 4 or 5 months old. And today actually is her 28th birthday. I had to add it up.
But you're only 38. How does that happen?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I started young. But I mean, why can't a dad, why does the casting need to know why the person's in a wheelchair? To me, that leaves the audience to draw and make up their own backstory. Why does it need to be explained? We don't explain why the character's wearing glasses. We don't explain why the character, you know, has red hair or blonde hair, but yet the character does. So why do we have to explain why the character is in a wheelchair? You know, nobody questions glasses anymore, but yet they are a prosthetic that people use to make their life easier. Mine just happen to be hooks. Mine are, do they replace my hands? No. But they are the tool that I have to use to pump my gas and that I have to use to grab my groceries. And that's the same thing a dad might be doing if he's in a film or a television show, is pushing a cart around and grabbing groceries. So it doesn't matter whether it's with a hand or a hook. It doesn't have to be explained.
I totally agree, and the whole pilot thing, like, absolutely. I mean, like, I evolved, you know, that week before filming Invisible. You know, at first I thought, well, I was like going all PSA in my head. You know, I was like, well, Brian, and I'll admit it, I'm dumb, right? Like, I mean, I've been, you know, I mean, I had a conviction about wanting to help change representation, but I really just stupid. So I said to Brian, I said, okay, well, bring your wheelchair. He's like, I don't use a wheelchair. I'm like, but when I met you on set, you were in a wheelchair. You know, that's stupid, right? But I mean, I didn't know. And he's like, no, that was the prop. Loved it. So maybe it was that moment that week, but I was kind of going all PSA, and I was like, well, I'm going to call it, you know, they don't give you a lot of information. So, I mean, you can, I mean, they don't give you a lot of information about what the 48 hours, you know, that's the whole point, is they save it. So, you know, you can think all week long, and you could be totally off. But I said, well, I think I'll call it Invisible, and, you know, he'll be like in this wheelchair at this corner, and people will just keep not seeing him, you know. And I was like, yeah. And then somewhere midweek, I'm like, oh, to hell with that, you know, like that's so PSA. Like, this is a narrative. This is like a dramatic or comedic. We didn't know at the time, but this is like a dramatic narrative short. Like, I have this opportunity, this fantastic DP, Brad Rushing, that came on board, who shot like a bazillion beautiful commercials, and his work's stunning. And I was like, oh, we have Brad, you know, like let's go to town on this. But so in the end, I love talking about this so much, because it's exactly that point. I wrote a role. It didn't matter, like, if Nina had played Brian's role or Brian had played Nina's role, you know, it just didn't matter. And I think more of that, whether it's, you know, gender or, you know, what we're talking about, just across the board, just more of that. The role is the role, and I mean, there's both sides to that, you know. So then I just have to say, Jenny Gold has that amazing movie, Cinability, if you haven't heard of it or seen it. Like, that was a great eye-opener, too. And, you know, somebody here could probably, you know, take some airtime and talk about that.
Can you say that again, that question? Because it wasn't really clear. I didn't.
Right. Now I have to think of what it was. It's yeah, like crafting the roles specific for disabilities. How does one go about that if they don't have a disability or don't know somebody with a disability?
Sure. Got a little quick one there. You see the person, you don't see the disability. And you see an actor. You see actors with talent. You see him? I mean, that was a great scene. Donna, we did an episode where Donna falls, and the process that it takes her to get up and get help. And we were blessed to have Kim Estes, who was here in our show as well. And he was here, I don't know. But anyway, you see the actors. I mean, she's a great actress, and she's a great dancer.
Oh, you're too kind.
Oh, go on. No, but that's, you know, and then you're like, we can do a show because you guys have talent. You can do that, you know? You can be the dad or whatever you can be, you know?
Okay, I get it, okay. Okay. Yeah, it's more clear now that I can see more visually what's okay. So I've met some people who have asked me, oh, man, you are so talented. I don't know what to do with you. Like, how do I... like, where do I put you? And it just kind of, like, I don't understand. Like, if I'm skilled, you know, it's like putting a label, like, I'm black, I'm a black deaf man. It's like a label on me. So it could be like a barrier in their minds. So until I met someone, a director from Arkansas, and I mean, for that state, Arkansas, and he got in touch with me and he said that he liked to play roles of magicians, you know, or somebody who's saving the day. And I'm like, ooh, a hero? That's not a bad idea. And so I just went ahead and I did that, and without realizing that, you know, with the signing and the speaking at the same time that I had to do. It's like doing that, you know, two things at the same time, you know, signing and speaking. It really was tough. It was a tough role, and I never experienced that before. So without, you know, resistance, just going ahead and saying, all right, I'm gonna try and do it. You know, I'm gonna go to Arkansas. I'm gonna study really, really hard. I'm gonna learn the lines and how to like sign it all.
Not that easy.
It was not that easy, thank you. So I just kept going through with the show, and then, you know, I was mostly worried about, I mean, do I speak clear? Like, can they really clearly hear me? They're like, oh, yeah, you're clear when you speak. Yeah, like, it's like a cold night, 12th night and all that for months. And so, you know, it was really cold, so my voice, I had to warm it up, but it was really hard. I got sick. And I was seriously, like, my throat, and I was just, like, talking, and I was like, when I was talking. And people were clapping, and they were very much like, wow, that's so scary, the way you're using your voice. And I was like, really? Okay. And so I watched a movie of myself, and I was like, oh, I like what I'm seeing. I am good in that, you know? And I was like, yay, awesome.
You know, one quick comment on that was I started too, well, about 6 years ago. I've been making films for a long time, but I started making disability films or films about disability, but then entered into the Disability Film Challenge. Nick and I had been friends for a long time, and he was talking about it, and he asked me to do a film. And the very first one, 6 years ago, we won the best film that year. And the two other clips from mine are from the film, one with Blair. The last one was Whitney's Wedding, and that starred with Blair, Gail's son, and Jamie Brewer. And that film has been around the world 2 or 3 times and won awards all over. And it was Best International Film in Australia and Italy. I mean, it's been all over. But I think making content for yourself, what I've done now is this new little web series we just did called You Did What? And it has nothing to do about disability. The character, me, just happens to have a disability, and we relate to it, be it that it was a Vietnam. But it has nothing to do with disability. And so it's just a character that that's a double amputee. We never explain it. But he cooks breakfast, he does whatever. Pisses off his son and does a whole bunch of bad things.
And he smokes guitar.
And he smokes cigars, yes. And he drinks scotch. And he drinks scotch. Write what you know.
I really like to also say about the part about the movie that I did. It was the Door in the Woods. Door in the Woods. Oh, yay, interpreter. Okay, right on the nose. She's a great interpreter. So anyway, so I had this pristine movie. So we put it out, and we watched it. And they warned me, and they said that, you know, with the captions, you know, it's like a festival. So the audience, they wouldn't expect to see captions on the screen. So we went all the way to the end. So after the movie was done, people would come up to me and the director, and they would say, I never thought about captions before. You know, that actor, he just happened to be deaf. And so, you know, he was signing and stuff, and I would look down at the captions, and he was just right there, and it was just like, thinking about the captions, how different it was for the audience, and how that really added more access for everybody. So the audience, most of them were hearing, you know, so now it was their time to read the caption with us signing. So they missing the sound with the door closing, for example. So like the footsteps, there were no, you know, with that sound. Or even if somebody farted, like a fart. You know, it was just beautiful how we did it. So you could, yeah, it was great. So are you guys laughing? Okay, all right, so it worked, the joke worked, okay. All right, just seeing if you guys got that, okay. So I just decided that was beautiful to show how, you know, we have roles that really require, you know, all of these things and how to make it work and, you know, how to be flexible with it. There are many different ways to have success, you know, on the screen. There's anything is possible. So it's not looking at things that are impossible, no. It's about the body and the way things move and how we communicate and the people and the diversity and just how we all put it together. It's a beautiful story, you know, that's called Honest. It's authentic. I meant authentic, yeah. Thank you.
No, I well said. I think authenticity is what's been the difference between the content that's being created now and some of those, you know, more grandiose, well-known disabled films, because they don't age very well, because they were written and produced and directed and acted by people without disabilities. And I think there's a real authenticity to the work that we see tonight, and the performers we have here, and the content creators we have here. I wanted to touch on, I hate to ask this because I certainly know what the answer will be, but for people who are concerned about accommodations on set, for people with disabilities, can you speak a little bit to what, and maybe how SAG works with a production to what sort of accommodations, roadblocks might there be for somebody to hire somebody with a disability?
Yes, I just want to jump in because that's really one of the, like, just such an important experience that helped me and the company and SAG, just all of us as a whole, to see the success of Baby Driver, that with the role that I did in there. And so I auditioned, and they called me. I went into the room, and I did not bring an interpreter. There was no interpreter. So I wanted them to experience and see how to communicate with just me, a deaf person, and like Edgar Witt. Edgar Wright. Sorry, interpreter, sorry. Edgar Wright, yes, it was. So the director for Baby Driver, he like watched me and everything that I was doing. He said, okay, with the acting, it's great, but before CJ, and then after that, you know, it's different. So he called me to go in again, and it was the same group of people in the room. And so Edgar was there, he was sitting, we were trying to communicate, and then they cast me for the role, so that was great. And so now, going back, he auditioned many hundreds and hundreds of hearing actors for that role, like so many that he saw. And then he picked me. Why? Because it was authentic. So he traveled, he spoke about that actually. You know, he educated people about the importance of really getting the authentic actor. And then so he found me. Oh, so Ed Buckheimer. So he invited me to his house, and we watched a private like screening, and we discussed, all of us, they were asking questions, and they were saying, is he really deaf? And yes, of course, yes. So all of them, the people who are upper, the writers and the directors, the people, you name it, they were all just like in shock. They've never seen anything like that before. They were just fascinated, like, wow. And now, like, how do you communicate on set, they asked. Well, with an interpreter. So you put an interpreter there with me every single day. They're with me. And then if I, you know, except for the bathroom. Okay, they're not there. They're not with me there. Thank you. And anyway, so for like months and months and months, we'd go back and forth. I'd be flying back and forth. And they'd ask, you know, do you need an interpreter on the plane? I'm like, no, I'm independent. I don't need an interpreter on the plane. I can fly by myself. And so I had to educate them as well. They learned on set. Everybody, you know, they really appreciated it. They learned so much. They worked so hard. And they saw, oh, okay, I'm the same, you know, as all of them. And so, you know, it's just, I just need an interpreter. Then once we had that, we can just move along with the process very fast. So it was really important that, you know, the industry has the experience of working with someone with disabilities so they can see how they can provide the access, how they can use an interpreter, how can they use authentic actors. So now it's the right time. It's opening. These doors are opening. And so we have to really push ourselves through and educate with the right attitude. That's it. That's it.
I just want to add something that that when you do hire someone with a disability, they have an experience that they have gone through that maybe other people haven't gone through. And if you give them the chance to work on set, you will get that, I guess, organic, authentic experience coming through their work. Now, everybody has a story. Everybody has their own experience. And if you include performers with disability who have the passion, they want to work, they don't want to be a problem, they want to do what they can to make things go easy. I mean, they're not there to cause a problem. They're like, I know I am. They're like, well, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to be? You want me to do it again? Yeah, do I have another one inside me? You betcha. You know, and then they also bring out not only the passion, but the experiences that they have from life that will come across in the camera work, that will come across in the acting, and the audience will feel that spirit and feel that energy. That's it.
One of the things I think, and that I think is very important, is the education of the producers and production companies, because a lot think that it's going to cost more money if they have somebody with a disability, whether in a wheelchair user, or anything like that. And one of the things that Scott Severi has done is made it very clear that, as one of the executive producers and the creator of Speechless, that having an actor there in a wheelchair hasn't cost production any more money. Because actually, the accommodations that are made are none more than what is required by the ADA, which is already required by federal law. So there is nothing more that he has to do to accommodate his actor in a wheelchair. And going back to your question to begin with, or I think the original one, is that SAG-AFTRA absolutely doesn't get involved in any creative process within the casting. You know, they're not going to say, well, you need to cast this person. But the union does act as a liaison between other organizations that might represent hearing impaired actors, or actors with a disability or an amputation or something like that. So that's one thing that, going back to CJ's comment earlier, and captions, one thing, I've been a long-time member of the National Committee for Performers with Disability in both the Legacies and now Together, is that when you get screeners, if there's a deaf SAG-AFTRA member, the screeners were not captioned. And a lot of times, this was because they've been put out real fast before the movies even come out a lot of times, so they haven't had the time to do it. And there are now companies that will do it a lot quicker. But because of the work of the union, because of SAG-AFTRA and the PWD committee, now the screeners will now be captioned when they come out to actors. So that's one of the things that has happened.
I just wanted to add very quickly that I'd lost my train of thought. No, most there it is. You dropped it. Thanks. Most people that I know that use a walker or a wheelchair or whatever, all the way from the experiences I had with my dad to what I have with Donna, you give yourself such a head start. You know, nobody's going to be waiting on you. It's like, okay, if it's going to take me 20 minutes to get out, I'm leaving a half hour early, or whatever. So I think there's this belief that if you hire someone that needs crutches or a walker or a wheelchair, that you're going to be waiting on them. And I found it completely the opposite, and I'm sure most of you have. And that's just the most ridiculous argument I can think of.
Yeah, I just add, I find it interesting that I've been on sets where, stars, there's entire production shut down because a star won't come out of their dressing room, and yet people are scared about, right.
We actually do want to do this. Yes. I mean, most of us we actually do want to act and work and be on a set. I mean,
I need to buy my daughter a birthday present. So.
And also, I wanted to share with you all, with every one of you, with your experiences, hearing all of this. With me, I don't sit and wait. I'm not waiting for the phone to ring or none of that. No. I always continue and keep going. I'm searching. I'm trying to find work myself. A long time ago, it was hard. Oh, it was a hard shift from that way of making something, of performing. People would come to me and I'd perform. And so, I would just keep on acting and it would just be fluid how it would all go. And so, and then it didn't work, and then I would try another way, and then I would try another way, but then I would become more and more comfortable, and I would pull from different sources, and I would become aware of what I was putting out, and there was many more deaf roles that would pop up as well. And so all of it, you know, it was just about pushing through all of that, you know, having the energy to keep going and being stubborn and not giving up. So that was what worked, and that is what really blossomed, was that. So, you know, you can't stop. You cannot stop. You have to keep going. You have to really work together to make it happen. Together. So, you know, not without that. Okay, I love you guys. I love you guys.
Okay, so we have the talent, we have the experience, we have the representation, we have interesting stories to tell. What's the problem? Why? What is the barrier that's going on here that is keeping us from really achieving equality?
I think it's basically everything we just talked about. It's education. It's education of the industry. It's not one gatekeeper. It's the industry. That there are not special accommodations that have to be made because you might have an actor in a wheelchair or that uses a walker, because the ADA already requires that you do that. So I think it's education that there are trained actors with disabilities out there, you know. And I think one of the best ways, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, is to make your own content. And one of the best ways is through the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge.com that happens, and you can start registering in January. And but it's opened, it's taught me a lot, it's helped me a lot, it's helped me as an actor, it's helped me as a producer, and it's helped me as an individual because I've learned about other disabilities. To me, the only thing I knew about was amputations, but I've learned about Down syndrome and how great it is to work with people with Down syndrome. You know, how and Gail could speak to this a little more, but you know, there was this, when I started to do this Whitney's wedding last year, Gail sent me this book or this paper that was done by this professor on if people with Down syndrome ran the world, there'd be more hugs, there'd be more smiles. And I made all of my actors and all my crew read this paper before we filmed last year. You know, because I wanted all of them. And then I had the writers over at my house, and I had Gail and Blair and Jamie and her mom and dad. And we all had a cookout on Friday before the writers wrote the script because I wanted them to know the actors, and I wanted them to know that it wasn't a disability, it was just an extra chromosome.
Can I say that also for Peggy? She has guts and courage to put something forward. Our episode Fall was a very courageous episode, as was really the runaway wheelchair. And she took on that challenge of doing this episode that was, I mean, I said, you want me to do what? You want me to, okay, in a wheelchair, okay. Right? Wasn't it how we listened to that?
Yeah. Real quickly about that episode, I work with a stunt coordinator named Vince Stedrick Jr., who's kind of a legend. He's been around for about 40 years. He's on Titanic. He had this idea, because I asked him if he would want to do an episode and direct and stuff, and he came up with this, and I'm like, and the door hits, and then there's water, and and she, oh, look, back of a truck, and you know, so like, let me talk to Donna, and of course we had stunt people, everything was safe. She had Drew Barrymore's stunt woman, and but still, it's her too. It's her going, why not? Okay, all right. And then this episode that we did Fall, I had this idea because on occasion, when she's fallen, you know, she'll call me or something, I help her, her friends help her. And it's just like, well, what if that's an episode? What if we actually show a little bit of what that's like for people? And she had the courage to show herself like crawling across the floor. We didn't do it in real time, but it's almost 3 minutes of the thing with music to try to keep it a little lighter or something, you know. But she had the courage to do that. And then we tried to have the episode that had, you know, some funny and some sad, but like I was going for the tone of, I worked on Will and Grace for 8 years, and I saw what you can accomplish with humor, how you can educate people and they don't even know it. They're just laughing, and all of a sudden, oh, I care about Jack. You know, when we first started shooting that show, the camera guys, the big camera crew, we had just come from Menley shows, you know, and we go over to Will and Grace, and within 4 weeks, we did this Halloween episode where Jack has met a guy, and it didn't work out. And our camera guys were like, "Aw," and I thought, oh my God, they did it. They did it. They found a way to care about someone that they might never have cared about before. And I think that's what we can do with this.
I'd like, just real quick point is that you've got 3 actors here who created their own content. And CJ created his own content 30 years ago, before there was even a platform to put your own content on. You would go out and do it on stage because there was no internet, there was no place to put it. I think it's so important, one, that you do that, because anybody can do it with a cell phone nowadays, and just post it, just do it. The other thing is, I think that makes you better at your craft. One of the problems we often have is that we have great actors that don't get in the room often enough to get over their nerves when they're in the room. And I think if you're creating content and you're working with other people and you're putting yourself out there, you're making it hard for yourself so that you're stretching those muscles, because I can get you in the room, but once you're in the room, you've got to stay there, and you've got to be able to let go of those nerves. And I don't blame anybody for them. When you, like how many auditions you were saying, 6 in a year? Well, of course you're going to have nerves when you go on an audition, but when you've got 6 in a week, it's not so desperate feeling. And so take a class, damn it. Oh my God. Take an acting class. Stretch those muscles, make them work. You're not going to run a marathon just because there's one coming up. You need to stretch the muscles of acting too. If all my actors were working as hard at their craft, with taking classes and exercising that muscle, I think we'd have, some of it falls back on them a little bit. Another thing I want to share is when your agent says to you, you need new headshots, don't say, oh, I still look just like that. God, I don't want to hear that. I want you to get a new headshot because the one you have is not working. Casting directors are sick and tired of that purple shirt. They want to see something new to consider you. I don't sit around and make it up when I say, oh, get new headshots. I'm not going to tell you that, but don't ever say, but I still look just like that. It's like, geez, but maybe you could move over here instead of over there in your headshot so that we see something new about you this time.
And so I want to share with you all that I was involved with Avatar right now. So the sequel, I'm actually involved with Avatar right now, the sequel, and it's coming out in 2020. Yay, yes. So now I've been working, for 2 years, now. And I'm meeting so many people. I'm meeting everyone that I can find, the crew, like so many, the camera person, the director, the writer, just editor, I don't even care. I'm just meeting people. I'm saying, hello, how are you? And I just start, my interpreter comes over with me and we're like, how are you? What are you doing? What are you up to? And then, we just start like chatting and we're fascinated with our talk. We know each other. And then later, I pitch. Well, I say what I'm doing. Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. This is what I'm up to. This is what I'm up to. And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know. They're kind of shocked. And so I go and I meet people. And finally, with 2 years, I'm starting to get comfortable with my own production team. Because people are coming up to me, they're interested. I'm pitching my script, I'm sending things, they're reading it. And they're like, oh, I love it, I want to work with you. And I'm like, yes, yes. So they know, like it's like this big money, come over, it's not about that. It's about people. It's not just about the money, it's about the people. It's about getting involved. It's about being, really into it and knowing how to get comfortable with my own work and my own involvement through a team getting together. And then, so actors, getting them together, whatever way you can find work and however you can go through it and pitch and connect with each other and networking. Don't be afraid to meet people. you know, I don't like meeting someone saying, oh, okay, hi, yeah, I'm deaf. I grew up frustrated. I'm depressed. I don't share anything. I'm depressed. It's crappy. No, no, no. I share exciting things that I'm doing. I'm saying, look at me. So, you know, forget, you know, CJ, the person that you see in front of you. I want you to see CJ more shining my light. You know, I want you to get hooked, you know, with you. So that's what works. Yes. Oh, the hook. Oh, I get it. That. Yes, that.
You guys planned that, right? Yeah. Well, one way to get it more commonplace out there is to have evenings like tonight. So I want to thank all of you that came and spoke tonight. And Ellen, thank you, and to all of Move LA for hosting this event. And certainly, Donna, thank you for coming up with this idea to have this panel in this forum. And so we all just encourage you that are content creators out there to embrace these new stories and these new ideas. They're not that scary, and they're going to be far more interesting than what's been created already.
And
so,
if I can...
So thanks a lot, and have a good evening, and drive semi-safely, because if not, you can join us.